Welcome back, and in this part we're going to assemble the timing cover, the oil pan, and the rotating assembly to complete the short block. Next we're going to add the head and adjust the valves and get the motor ready for break-in. So if you please subscribe if you've enjoyed the series so far, and just love to hear your comments, and if you think I did something wrong, please let me know. I'm not perfect, but I do have enough experience doing these motors to have made enough mistakes. So anyway, with that, let's get started and doing the assembly.
This is your distributor gear. It's brass, and sometimes it disappears, either from your machine shop or it falls off when you're working on it. But you find it later, or you don't, or you totally forget it exists because you don't see it. And just put a little bit of I put a little bit of grease on here, just make it a little easier to get on, and use a little bit of break-in lube on there. And it goes on pretty straightforward. It just slides on like right there. And this is kind of one of the reasons that it's kind of disappears. It's because it does just that. This is the shelf that holds your timing chain gear on. And as we said, our cam is in the head, but our cam sprocket is not. So this is the thing that holds the cam sprocket. This is the timing mark for your cam sprocket. I paint it red just so it's real easy to see, and we set this to TDC number 4, not number 1, number 4. Be a person that's gotten it backwards and then their distributor's 180 degrees out. So it simply goes right here in these bolts there. And what I like to do is I like to actually use, this is where I like to use a little bit of blue Loctite and a lock washer, and these are really small bolt holes, so sometimes you get what comes with it. What comes on the car with your motor will be regular ones. I'm using these little Allens, they're 12 gauge, is because these, much like some other parts of the motor, being this shelf, being that gear, they tend to disappear when you get used blocks, or you get used motors, or your machine shop forgets them or loses them because they're small and not something they're normally used to seeing. So getting those on there before you start working on the rest of it just kind of solves it. They don't get in the way. They don't, it's easier to have them on now and then not have to remember to put them on later. All right, so now we're going to look at the gaskets. There's 2 gaskets. One goes here and one goes down here. And let me show you those because there's a couple of things that you need to see about them. As you can see here, you see a little bit of that yellow gasket sticking through. That yellow gasket's more of an older gasket that came out. I believe it's a Felpro gasket. You see it lines up in the holes pretty well. The black one is more of a newer one. And what you're seeing right here is what I want to kind of show you. It's like, they're not lining up. It doesn't line up for some reason on that bottom one where it covers itself. It's more pronounced on this side for some reason. I am not sure why, but when you have it in the hole, this one just does not, for some reason, line up right. So you got to go and re-punch some of those holes before you actually prepare it, put the gasket on. So double check those. Also, you will notice that there is this flange sticking out here. Cut that away. I'll show you this in a minute, but basically that you want to trim. You want to trim the tops of these and the bottom of these so they don't actually protrude past the block surface. If you put them on just like they are, they're gonna leak. You're gonna leak your timing cover. You take your gasket and you put it over the stud, the alignment stud here, and then you go and check all the holes and make sure all your holes align. In this case, this one's good, so you're not gonna worry about that one. This one, take this one off, and again you put a line on the bottom, and this one, as you can see here, for whatever reason, when we line up these 2 holes, that one's too high and that one's too low. So basically you have to come back. I'll take it off, and in that case, and then I use a hole punch and see if I got it. And it's kind of a hit and miss thing. And as you can see, this one's so far out there that even though I missed that, it's almost easier in some cases in this, if you don't have one, and let's just assume we don't have one right now. I will just come in here and clip that around. You'll have the gasket along the side between the body and the motor, because that's what's going to seal. You know, that's still going to seal right there along that edge, and it is a higher op part, so it shouldn't get too bad. And there you can see we have it. Now you can also see where this gasket's sticking out on either side, so you're just going to go and trim that back a little bit there too. That. And so there you go. Now your bolt hole's open, but you're going to have a little bit of issue there. But I'll show you what we're going to be doing on that. So this one here, I need to come up on the top of it a little bit. Just do it. And there we go. So, okay. So now we're good there, and we know like this one's good. Now, as I mentioned before, what you're going to want to do too is you want to get your scissors out, and you're going to cut. You're going to cut roughly about an 1/16 of an inch, 1/18 of an inch off the top. When you do that, we'll trim there, and we're good. And do the same thing on the bottom here. Once you got these trimmed up how you want them, you're going to get your Texas copper spray, and you're going to spray your gas. Make sure you know which side you're gluing, because you want to glue both sides. So, this side's going to be glued, and like I said, this one, because of this one happens to be there. So, I need to lay a piece of cardboard down so I can spray them. I will spray the block. And just 6 inches away. All right, like that. And now you're gonna let it sit for a few minutes or so till it gets tacky, and then you'll apply the gasket. And your gaskets are now tacky enough. You just go right back over here and put them on. And again, the gaskets are gonna do the sealing, not the adhesive. The adhesive's there mainly to keep your gaskets in place when you do all your other work. So, and there we go. Nice and all right. Put that on. Next, you'll get your tensioner pad that goes on the side of the block here. This. And you're going to want to go, it's going to go that way. You're going to put your bolt in it. And you put the bolts in, you got a little washer, now put a little bit of Loctite in them. And then you're going to go, and they use a 14mm. They're tight. Obviously, we need to get the chain on. And before we get the chain on, we need to align the block. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your thumb here, and you're going to go down, go down, go back. Sometimes you get, sometimes it wants to be at pain, so you got to come back up. And so you go back down and come back up. So go back up and down. So you basically want to feel for that top dead spot. And I kind of just close my eyes and use my thumb, and you can kind of feel it. And when you're done, you look, and if you see that this is pointing straight up to that, and you are right dead lined up with the bottom of the crank there, you are exactly where you need to be. And at that point, you'll get your chain out, and as you see, there's the sprocket has a little mark on it, and I put a little bit of red there so you can see it. And you'll bring this in over this way, up and over, and there you go. It's right there where it needs to be. This is going to point at 12, and this will be down there at about 5. So what you do is slide that up and That should be about right. Put that down like that. The real key here is sometimes you'll notice that this chain likes to move. That's one of the key things. Remember, we got that on. Now, one last thing we need to do is remember those corners that we have? We want to put a little bit of black RTV, just a little bit, not a lot, right along here. Especially on this one. This one you want to be careful of because you got an oil galley right there. So you want to rub any of that off. You just want it just to be a little proud on the very, very lip edge there. You put a little bit right there on that bottom edge. A little right there on that bottom edge. And a little there on that edge there. This is to compensate for where you cut the gasket and also to make sure you get a nice good seal. There are multiple different length bolts. You'll probably notice are this one, and this one. These are the longest of the bolts. These are the longest of the bolts because they go to the water pump and they go through here, here, and here. Ta-da. All right. So, the shortest bolts are also the water pump. These three only bolt to the timing cover, not into the block. So those are your three there. And of course the 8mm one I had to use because the bolt, that was actually a little out. So, now, there are mid-sized bolts. They're not as huge, long, but they're also not as short. Those are inside the oil pump. The upper corner here, the bottom of the left, and the bottom of the right. Now, the second to longest bolt, I'm sorry, and this one also is a long bolt, like the oil pump cover. I meant like the water pump bolt. Then, so you got 4 of these. You have 3 of these that are long, but they're not as long as those 4. So cleaning them up and getting them prepared so you know where they all are would be helpful. Remembering which ones go where, that would also be helpful. But again, that's why I'm doing the video here, so you can kind of see which ones go where. And as I said right there, there they go. So that's where all your bolts go on your time. Now, one other note to mention, these are all M7 by 1. These are not available at Amazon. They are not available at Fastenal. They are only available on a used motor at Opel GT Source. And from, Opel's Unlimited, Todd will have them used. Call me, I got a buttload of them, especially the long ones. The short ones you can get this one. Fortunately, these, if you have a problem and you're replacing your water pump, you can get those. And these are also possible to get. It's these really super long ones that are going to be hard to get. So anyway, so those are your bolts, and on actually assembling, putting the timing cover in. All right. Now, with your timing cover, and you're going to use your second to longest bolt, and your second to short, 2 of your second to shortest bolts. Starting with your second to shortest bolt, you're going to make sure your tensioner is not in. Like I said, just make sure that tensioner is backed out so this is out of the way, like that. All right. So you hold that there. You're going to come in. You're going to get that lined up, get it over there, and then you're going to, with your hand, don't do this. and then you'll slowly grab it so that you'll see the chain grab, and then you'll just align it to the pins, those two pins that we had before. Now you got everything nice and aligned, and you lift that up. If you lift it up, you'll see that that's still sitting at TDC. Nothing's moved, and then you will put that bolt in. Nice and tight, finger tight. And then you'll take this bolt, and you'll take your second shortest bolt, and put it in right there. Second longest bolt, put it in right there. Now, you can go put in the rest of the bolts if you want to, and in a zigzag pattern, tighten them up and torque them, but I want to do something else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this bolt up here, so I can get the chain tight. See, the chain's nice and tight now. And take my 19mm, hold your sprocket up, and crank the motor. Over a couple of times, and now line that up. And you should have felt it give just a little bit, just when this motor comes. Because now when you felt that give and you see that line, now if you pull this, you should feel that piston drop. And if you do, you know you're on the money. Now you can go and put all your bolts in and torque them to spec. Now you got those, then you're going to go and put in your others. So let's go into the medium short bolt here. Try to get that thing started a little bit. Start in there and set your second long bolt. Second long bolt. Over here to the long bolt. All right, and then your second long bolt is right here. All right, and that are all the timing bolt cover bolts. Now you're going to go get your torque wrench, and you're going to set your torque wrench. Yeah, your torque wrench. You got the torque wrench, and it's going to be 14 foot-pounds, but because I'm using a C.I.H drive, it's obviously in inch-pounds, so I got to multiply by 12, which would be 168. There we go, 168. But, and actually, as I've always mentioned before, got ahead of myself, I'm going to set it down to about 12 foot-pounds, which is 144. And then that will get me all of these tight, but not to spec. That way I can the acronym for Opel kind of stands for oil puddle everywhere left. And there's a good reason for that. Okay. So we're all good there. Everything's set up on our TDC where we're supposed to be. Which looks perfect. And now I'm just going to go through and wipe the extra RTV off. A little bit, just a little bit, but I don't, like I said, I'm not a big fan of having a lot of RTV on this. And your timing covers on. So our next step is to prep and set up and install the oil pan. So the pickup tubes do matter, but in this case not as much, because we don't have the extra crank weights, so it's not going to be as big a deal as to which one you use. And I'm going to be using a standard Opel aluminum pickup tube. Actually, you can get it off so I can show you. I forgot to do that. There is a washer, which is good, because you need this washer on here to make sure your torque is going to be right on your bearing. And you put that in. And you set that in, and then you basically finger tighten everything because you want to make everything fit. You don't want any stress on this tube, but you also want to make sure your torque's right and that your bracket's in the right place and all the other stuff. So we're going to do that. And get that right where it needs to be. Then we'd use a gasket under it. No sealant needed. It's paper, it's fine. That's what it's designed for. Don't want to get any RTV in there if you don't have to. And I use these little Allens with the lock washer as opposed to the Opel ones because sometimes the Opel ones are a pain in the ass to get on here right. Whereas the Allens, I can get in there and I can get around the pickup tube. Not so much a problem with the aluminum ones, but with the steel ones, the pickup tube is like above the oil pan. You know, above the washer. You don't want to make sure you don't want to crack this. If you crack that base or don't have a good seal here, you'll end up with low oil pressure. I think I mentioned that on the last video that I was referencing to a minute ago. So we got that, and then we set this to our torque spec we're supposed to have. And we're torqued. So now we got the pickup tube in, and we're going to go and test fit the oil pan. This is something I do because I'm just always curious. Sometimes different pickup tubes, different pans, they don't necessarily like each other. And this is one of those cases. It's not liking each other here. Looks like we got a little bit. It's riding up a little bit there. So I might have to go and check. See, I pick up a lot of these pickup tubes and pans and such. Are from different motors, different ages. They have some bending. They've been in storage for some time, and these pipes bend really, really easy. So since we know we're hitting here, you can kind of see how that's almost probably stock. I'm gonna have to go in there and massage that a little bit and make it all fit. All right, and all it took was a little bit of massaging. And that's kind of one of the problems recently with building motors for Opel motors is the mismatch of parts sometimes can cause you to have some problems. And this is where one of those cases is. This is aluminum pickup tube, aluminum pan on a 2.2 and I'm using the 2.2 pickup tube bracket to hold it because I can't find the pickup tube brackets for this. When people take the oil pans off and they discard the motors, or the motors are running around in junkyards or things like that, a lot of times these pickup tubes are broken or missing. Another problem you'll run into is you won't have the actual dipstick tube either. Here I don't have one yet either. I'm about to go work on that, and we're going to show you that in a minute too. Fortunately with this one, it does not look like I need to drill it because it just has a plug. Alright, so what you'll notice here is that we have a boss here and about 2 holes. These are for your dipsticks to go into. And this is if you had a front sump oil pan, that is if you have a rear sump oil pan. All our cars in the US are rear sump. Fortunately, this one had 2 drilled holes. Of the 2 4s and a lot of the 2 2s will have this hole filled, and you'll have to go and drill it out yourself. So if you have just one in here, you'll have to drill that one out. Most, if you've got a 1.9 or 2 liter, you're building a regular Opel block from what you already have in your car, this will not be an issue. This will be an issue. These are pickup tube. This is a pickup tube for your dipstick. Your dipstick goes run through here, and it's to basically keep your dipstick from hitting your motor, hitting the rotating gear. And you got to put it in, and it's going to be a tight fit. It should be a nice tight fit there. And then you'll either have to take a hammer and gently tap it down. You'll feel it seat, and you hear it kind of seat right there. And as you can see, this is where the motor is, so the dipstick will literally just miss when that motor comes up. And there you go. And now you can go and check and make sure it all works. You put your motor back up square, so your so your sprocket will hang. If your sprocket, you don't have the head on right now, so your sprocket's going to be, be able to move. But you want to be able to not have it bind on anything either, and like on the shelf that it's supposed to sit on, for instance. And now you can just check and, get good clearance on both. Nothing's gonna hit. And we're good. Up for the next step. All right, what you'll notice here is that it doesn't really kind of fit there quite right. This is another case of where these gaskets tend to kind of get a little bit of a copy of a copy things going on. So what you're going to do is you're going to trim this back. You're going to trim it back about 1/4 of an inch, and then you're going to trim a notch in it. And then you're going to refit it again. All right. Cut a little bit more than I wanted to, but it's not that big of a deal because our good friend Black RTV is going to come into play on this one as well. So you can do over here and do the same thing on the other side. Just basically kind of fit that in there, and you just taper. We'll do like taper cut it a little bit that way, and then trim a little off the end. It should, now that it lines up the bolt holes, be in there, and it is. So there we go. A little at a time. Don't go real big on it. Just kind of gently cut them until you got exactly what you want. Until all your bolt holes line up as best they can, and you're in where you need to be. All right. We are going to go ahead and use Gorilla Glue on this one. I've had good luck with it. I just have to caveat that because I think personally that when the oil absorbs into the cork, it expands the cork and the Gorilla Glue doesn't go anywhere. So far so good. Your results may vary. The other option would be using Black RTV for gluing this onto the block. That's a very valid option. I've done that. The reason I don't like using Black RTV to put on these is it doesn't seat up and it squirms. So in this case, I'm going to show the Gorilla Glue version of it, and both of them are the same. They start the same way. What you're going to do is you're going to take some Black RTV and you're going to push it in there. Really good. Get it in there good. Nice big blob of it. I know I said I don't like blobs of RTV, but this is an exception to the rule. So you get a little bit of, because you're also going to have a rubber seal that comes in here into play in a minute as well. So you want to get that there, and you want to let that set a little bit so it kind of gets a little firm. On that side, we'll do the same thing. Right there on the bottom. Glove off. I want you to do it. Little Black RTV there, and then I'm going to just let that sit there. That still should be wet and not dry though. And then you're just going to be very careful with this one because the Gorilla Glue, the one thing about it is it's damn near permanent once it gets in there. So, which again makes for a gasket that does not squirm on you and does a really good job. I will damage this gasket if I try to take it off. That's how tight that is. Yeah, the black RTV is still squirming right there, where this, where the Gorilla Glue wasn't getting it. And that's kind of the problem with using an RTV or something in this particular situation, because we're trying to mate a couple of different surfaces together and get them to seal, and seal for a long period of time. In the meantime, what I'm going to do while I'm waiting on the other side is I'm going to go run a bead of Black RTV up here. And I know I just said it's not very good for that, but what we're going to be putting here is not cork or paper. We're going to be putting rubber, and it will hold to the rubber better, and we want the rubber to squirm a little bit when we put on our oil pan. So that's what we're going to do there. So we do that, and I'm going to do the other side, and then when we come back, we did that, and then we put the cork on, And now we're going to put a little bit more black RTV in this corner. Again, as I mentioned, we're sitting here trying to make different things with different moving bits actually align and seal. And I'm doing the same thing over on the other end. It's basically the same. So now we got all those in, and what we're going to do now is we're going to get the rubber. As I mentioned before, there are 2 rubber pieces, and they need to really be exactly where they need to be centered as best they can and glued. So what they are, they're these. You got the long one on the front, and so in this case, like I said, I need to make sure it squirms because it's gonna be sealing and capping these 2 areas. So as you can see, it's covering up the RTV. The cork gasket is kind of sealing the other area, and the RTV is filling all the voids up top and bottom of that. It's not the perfect solution, but it seems to not leak for me. Simple matter of sliding the oil pan on. Again, we're going to go all the way down to almost nothing. We want this torque wrench, we want the torque to be basically even. We don't care what it is because we want it to be really low. There. Just like the heads it will do later, do these in a crisscross pattern. So everybody gets tightened up evenly, because that really does matter. You want a motor that doesn't leak oil. Alright, so like I said, we're pretty much done now. I just wanted to show you a few things. As you can see here, we have black RTV squirted out here, it's squirted out there, it's squirted out there. The way I did the black RTV on the back here was specifically to kind of make sure that when it squirted, it kind of went out of the motor, not in the motor. And you can see right here, it's a little... And you can see right there, it's a little bit there. But for the most part, I didn't get a whole lot squirting everywhere, and that much inside the motor could be a real problem. So don't use RTV unless you really have to, and then don't use too much. These corners on this oil pan are an exception to my rule, only because, well, nobody likes to put a fresh, brand new motor they spend a bunch of money and time on into their car to find it leaking oil. And yeah, that happens. And with that, we are done with the short block. Wanted to note the few things here before we check out. Number one, the torque on the timing cover is 14 foot-pounds. The torque on the left 3 bolts for your water pump is 14 foot-pounds, but the torque for your right 3 bolts is 11 foot-pounds. And that may be one of the reasons sometimes that they strip out, because people will over-torque them. Other thing I wanted to note that I need to make a small correction on, and that is the side bolt here. I said 30 millimeter earlier in the video. This is actually a 27 millimeter bolt, as you can see. And the one that's on the back of your oil pump cover, that one is a 24 millimeter socket. So right there you go. Just wanted to get that out of there. And also, this would be a good time too to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified of new videos that are going to come up. I'm going to be putting the head on here. I'm going to adjust the valves. I'll go over the difference in adjusting the solids versus lifters, hydraulic lifters. I'm also going to go into the fuel injection on this, because I'm going to be putting an LE2 fuel injection on this car because it came from a 2.2. and we're going to be doing a little bit on the distributors and maybe Pertronics and points, things of that nature. So we've got a lot more to do to wrap up this engine. We're getting close to that end line, but yeah, please subscribe and hit the bell so you can get notified of everything. It'd be appreciated. Thanks.